Executive Committee as well as Deputy Minister in government of South Africa. And we will start off our proceedings tonight by hearing from a strong global Palestinian voice, Omar Agoti, who is an independent Palestinian commentator and human rights activist. He is a founding member of the Palestinian Campaign for Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel and the Palestinian Civil Society Boycott, Disinvestment and Sanctions, BDS campaign. And I want to take this opportunity and deliberately, I have not yet introduced our panelists because our moderators will be introducing some of the panelists, but I can tell you amongst our panelists, we have Comrade Lindwes Zulu, we have Comrade Obed Judy, we have Auntie Bibi, we have Comrade Nduma Nana, Bongani Masuku, Your Excellency Hanan Jara, and one of our veterans, Comrade Ronnie Castros. I'm sure the moderators will elaborate more as they allow our panelists to come in. So welcome to this event, and over to you to set the scene for why this solidarity at this moment in the history of Palestinian struggle is so critical. Comrade Omar, over to you.
Thank you very much. Dear Excellency, dear comrades in the Alliance and civil society in South Africa, on behalf of the Palestinian BDS National Committee, the broadest coalition in Palestinian society and the leadership of the global boycott, divestment and sanctions movement for Palestinian rights, I thank you for inviting me to this important solidarity panel. The history of the PLO's resolute support for the ANC-led anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa was never forgotten by your great leaders like Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Ahmad Kathrada, Dennis Goldberg, and others. It is this unique partnership in struggle that allows Palestinians today to hold South Africa to a higher standard when we call for effective accountability measures in response to Israel's planned de jure annexation, including lawful and targeted sanctions against the Israeli regime of occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid. As an indigenous people, Palestinians today are deeply inspired by the Black-led uprising against systemic racism and white supremacy in the United States, which is organically connected to the global resistance to the US imperialist role worldwide. Successive US administrations, often with Israel's help, have sponsored or supported not just apartheid South Africa, but dictatorships, far-right regimes, and death squads to maintain the hegemony of multinationals and large banks over many nations in the global South and perpetuate their pillage and exploitation. In this context, the BDS movement stands resolutely with the movement for Black lives. If, quote, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed, as Steve Biko once wrote, then BDS is particularly crucial because of its role in decolonizing Palestinian minds, not just in contributing to the decolonization of Palestinian land. Begun in 2005 by the broadest coalition in Palestinian society, BDS has become the most effective form of international solidarity with our struggle for self-determination and liberation. It calls for ending the 1967 occupation, ending Israel's legalized system of racial domination, which meets the UN definition of apartheid, and the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes of origin in accordance with UN resolutions. The BDS movement is deeply rooted in decades of Palestinian popular nonviolent resistance and is particularly inspired by the South African anti-apartheid movement and the US civil rights movement. Anchored in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, BDS categorically opposes all forms of racism and discrimination, including anti-Semitism. Our movement targets complicity, not identity. As Israel becomes a role model for far-right, xenophobic, or authoritarian leaders across the world, from Trump and Salvini to Orban, and from Bolsonaro and Modi to Mohammed bin Salman, BDS is increasingly being recognized as a significant partner in a growing international progressive wave fighting for global indigenous, racial, economic, gender, social, and climate justice against the forces of fascism, xenophobia, and savage neoliberalism. Israel and its supporters are desperately attempting to suppress support for Palestinian rights and to ensure impunity for decades of apartheid and colonial oppression. From its brutal siege of Gaza to its land-grabbing construction of illegal settlements and gradual ethnic cleansing, especially in occupied Jerusalem, the Jordan Valley, and the Naqab, Israel has for decades been perpetrating what UN investigators recently concluded were acts that may constitute war crimes or crimes against humanity. This is what the ongoing Palestinian Nakba looks like. Upon visiting the occupied Palestinian territory, the late ANC leader Ahmed Katrada, who supported our BDS movement, said, quote, "In our short stay here, we have seen and heard enough to conclude that apartheid has been reborn here. In its reborn form, it is, however, worse than its predecessor." End of quote. But we remain hopeful despite all the pain and loss. BDS has won the support of major international trade union federations, starting with COSATU, the largest farmers' union in India with 16 million members, progressive women's group, academics, students, LGBT activists, and others. The cultural boycott of Israel is growing steadily, with thousands of artists endorsing it. Major corporations like Veolia, Orange, and others have suffered major losses or reputational damage due to BDS campaigning, forcing them to completely abandon their illegal projects in Israel. The city of Dublin in 2018 became the first European capital to endorse BDS. Mainstream churches in South Africa have endorsed BDS, while major churches in the US, including the Presbyterian Church and the United Methodist Church, have divested from their pension funds from complicit companies and banks involved in Israel's occupation. Today, members of the US Congress endorse BDS or defend the right to advocate for BDS and call for leveraging US aid to Israel to hold it accountable to international law. Tens of cities, cultural institutions, and public spaces in Spain, Italy, Belgium, Norway, Ireland, and elsewhere have declared themselves apartheid-free zones, calling for a military embargo on Israel or excluding from public tenders corporations that are involved in Israel's human rights violations. In South Africa, we rely on the great work of our partners in the South African BDS coalition, in COSATU, in trade unions, the Communist Party, ANC, and in civil society to pressure government to translate its consistent political positions in support of Palestinian rights into concrete and strategic measures that can significantly aid our liberation struggle. Specifically, and I'm coming to the end, Palestinians are calling on South Africa to help end Israeli apartheid and colonial rule by 1. Excluding from public contracts and investments all companies recently listed in the UN database of businesses involved in Israel's illegal settlement enterprise, as well as other companies that are proven to be complicit but have yet to be included on the list, including HP, Caterpillar, G4S, Heidelberg Cement, CAF, Hyundai Heavy Industries, among others. 2. Declaring a symbolic yet morally consequential military embargo on Israel. 3. Holding South Africans who have enlisted in the Israeli occupation army accountable to legal prosecution for involvement in war crimes in accordance with South African law. 4. Implementing the decision of the 2006 Non-Aligned Movement Durban Conference to ban all products of Israeli companies operating in the occupied territories and ban entry of Israeli settlers into South Africa. 5, and last, ensuring that Israeli political, military, and security leaders, as well as international and Israeli banks and corporations responsible for war crimes, are brought to justice. Walking past the grand statue of Nelson Mandela in Ramallah the other day, I saw young Palestinian kids standing solemnly underneath the statue and saluting it. Mandela's inspiring legacy lives on, rekindling our hope for freedom, justice, and equality. Palestinians look evil in the eye every day. We speak truth to power every day. Like our South African sisters and brothers, centuries of resisting colonialism have taught us to steadfast, to resist, and to insist on nothing less than our full menu of rights, as Archbishop Desmond Tutu once said. We count on you to help us bring to an end Israeli apartheid and to bring forth our South Africa moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Omar, for giving us this important context to why we are having this important event tonight. The ANC, in all its international resolutions, have always reflected on its position in solidarity with Palestine since 1994. It has been an important part of our foreign policy as a country, and South Africa has always closely watched and engaged on developments in the struggle for Palestinian self-determination. Moreover, as a member of the OAU and African Union, Democratic South Africa actively advanced the African position in support of Palestine, expressed in numerous resolutions of the OAU. Yesterday, on the 24th June 2020, during the UN Security Council teleconference on the question of Palestine, Deputy Minister Alvin Boertes reiterated this position of South Africa when he said, I quote, "Allow me to reiterate that South Africa will continue to support all efforts aimed at the establishment of a viable, contiguous Palestinian state existing side by side with Israel within internationally recognized borders based on those of 4th June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, in line with relevant UN resolutions, international laws, and internationally agreed parameters." Close quote. Our next speaker is Comrade Lindiwe Zulu. Comrade Lindiwe Zulu, she's the chairperson of the ANC International Relations Subcommittee. She's the member of the National Executive, and she is the Minister for Social Development. Over to you, Comrade Zulu.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mabe. The SG, I salute you all, comrades of the African National Congress, in particular the SG, all members of the National Executive Committee who are present here today, and members of the National Working Committee. I also would like to thank the previous speaker, Comrade Omar, and thank you very much for your continued support and your unwavering support in the struggle for the emancipation of the people of Palestine. To all the human rights activists who are participating here today, in particular the veterans of our own struggle, who have extended themselves beyond just the liberation struggle of South Africa, but have consistently committed themselves to the struggle for the Palestinian people, those who are here with us today. I wish to thank you, Comrade SG and the office and the DSG for arranging this solidarity meeting, and also to make the continued call by the African National Congress that we have to be consistent, we have to be resolute, we have to stay on course in as far as the struggle is concerned. And as we were also supported ourselves in our own liberation struggle by the very same Palestinian people, it is our turn, it is our time to remain on course. In pursuing our international relations and cooperation objective as the African National Congress, we are informed by the Freedom Charter, which was adopted on the 26th of June in 1955, wherein it stated, and still is relevant even today, I quote, "There shall be peace and friendship." This principle is founded on the African claims as adopted in 1943 and all our national conference resolutions, which are predicated on international solidarity as a pillar of the national democratic revolution. We have consistently taken resolutions, and we have a track record that indicates our solidarity with the Palestinian people. Our view of the world is based on the founding principles of the Freedom Charter, namely a world in which there is respect for the right of national sovereignty of all nations and the pursuit of world peace and friendship and not wars. As the ANC, our strategic objective is to ensure that we build a better Africa and a world that is free from shackles of underdevelopment and the legacy of colonialism. And as such, we'll continue to advance our progressive internationalism and solidarity around the world. And so to that effect, establishing and sustaining friendship, working towards peace and stability in the continent and the world, and improving economic relations is paramount. More paramount now, especially as we are facing the most difficult time of the spread of COVID-19 and the challenges that come thereof. So solidarity and campaigns for the African National Congress will continue to play a critical role in the continent and the global progressive movement. This is the cornerstone of the founding values of the National Democratic Revolution. And as such, we'll continue to galvanize and sustain solidarity relations with oppressed people in the continent and internationally. In 1990, our stalwart and former ANC President, Comrade Oliver Tambo, reminded us that, and I quote, "The fight for freedom must go on until it is won, until our country is free and happy and peaceful as part of the community of men, and we cannot rest." This also has to be extended to the struggle that the Palestinian people are facing. For this reason, the ANC will continue to regard its international relations and cooperation work as a key platform to advance and create a better world for all. And as far as the Palestinian struggle is concerned, our continued and unwavering support with the oppressed people of Palestine, you will recall that successive ANC national conferences have taken resolutions and action in support of the Palestinian people, with the most recent being our 54th National Conference, which resolved that, and I quote, "In order to give practical expression of our support to the oppressed people of Palestine, the ANC unanimously resolved to direct the South African downgrade of the South African Embassy in Israel to a liaison office, and this is what is happening. Consistent with this resolution, and as part of our demonstration of protest against continuous killing of the Palestinians by the Israel security forces, the ANC-led government took a decision to recall our ambassador to Israel in May 2018. We affirm our position that we do not recognize Israel's sovereignty over the territories they occupied from June 1967, including the Golden Heights. We do not consider them to be part of the state of Israel in line with international law and relevant UN resolutions, particularly Resolution 242 and 497. Therefore, we further call on the international community and the progressive world to strengthen its mobilization and support of the peoples of Palestine. The threats and pronouncements of annexation is an illegal act in international law, as already been expressed by my comrade Mabe. It is unacceptable unilateral act of seizing land from a state and a flagrant violation of international law, a disregard for international humanitarian law, the United Nations Charter, and the Rome Statute. Therefore, we oppose this in the strongest terms, and all the ANC will continue to mobilize South Africans, the SADC region through the liberation movements, progressive forces in the continent and the world to condemn the annexation of Jordan by Israel, backed by the USA administration. We call on the African continent also to work with us as we continue with this liberation struggle. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Comrade Lindiwe. The SG has done the welcome and has acknowledged all the participants. I won't be doing that for the sake of time. Thank you, Sislin Diwe, for reminding us of our numerous resolutions and actions that our liberation movement and government have taken in support of the struggle of the Palestinian people. I will now call upon Comrade Frans Baleni, who is the South African Communist Party Secretary of the International Relations and a former General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers and the current chairman of Petro SA. Comrade Frans, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Comrade Mabe. Good afternoon to the leadership of the African National Congress, COSATU, SACP, the NGOs, veterans, and fellow panelists. The South African Communist Party unwaveringly stands with the people of Palestine in their struggle for fundamental right to self-determination. The SACP fully supports the intensification of the just cause to end the apartheid Israel occupation of Palestinian land. Our next step is to upgrade our program of action, focusing on strengthening international solidarity, democratic and peaceful activities in support of the oppressed people of Palestine. In the same way, the SACP calls upon the African Union to demonstrate and express active solidarity with the oppressed people of Palestine by adopting and implementing a program of action to support their just struggle for democratic national sovereignty. The program should include the objectives of global boycott, sanctions against the apartheid regime of Israel as a starting point, and imports of Israel products produced from the occupied Palestinian territories should be completely prohibited in our continent. As a sign of continental unity, a clear message of solidarity with the oppressed and expropriated people of Palestine. We know better as South African.
Comrade Frans Baleni is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
We can hear you. Okay.
Oh, okay.
You can proceed, Comrade Baleni.
Okay. So we fully support the solidarity campaign to an extent that over the decades, people of Palestine have been oppressed. It is time for them to be free. We know better the pain we have gone through to be where we are today in 1994 and starting to enjoy our freedom. The SACP fully supports this campaign against the annexation of land of people of Palestine. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Frans Baleni, for the message and the statement that is very clear on behalf of the South African Communist Party. Our next speaker is a member of the Global Boycott, Sanctions, Disinvest Campaign, BDS for short. Comrade Judy Favish is an activist and leader of the BDS South Africa Committee, and will be in her input tell us about the BDS, the work it does, and its current campaign to stop the annexation. Comrade Julie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Obert, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this very important meeting today of the Alliance. So I want to start by recognizing and affirming that South Africa has had a long history of solidarity with Palestine, but that solidarity has largely been structured on a local basis. And towards the end of last year, in order to address some of the weaknesses associated with the local-based approach, the International Palestinian BDS movement entered into discussions with some of the comrades who have been involved in solidarity work in South Africa with a view to launching a coalition comprising largely Palestinian solidarity organizations, but in alliance with civil society organizations. And to that end, a conference was organized in February this year, which was attended by about 11 Palestinian solidarity organizations, but who had also consulted with members of civil society, key organizations such as the union movement. And at the end of that meeting, an interim committee was elected, and a set of key principles which would underpin the way in which the coalition would approach the task of organizing campaigns in support of the Palestinian struggle were adopted. This interim committee is now the officially recognized structure for communicating with the international solidarity movement. The strategic vision of the coalition is to fight for a just peace, democracy, equality, and safety for all those who live in historic Palestine. Naturally, we support the three key priorities of the BDS movement internationally, which, as Comrade Omar articulated, include ending the Israeli occupation and dismantling the wall, full equality for Arab Palestinian citizens, and recognizing and respecting the rights of return. We had hoped to launch the coalition formally in July this year, but due to the COVID pandemic, that has proved difficult. We have organized a number of solidarity activities already, including an international webinar to commemorate the International Nakba Day. But our key campaign is really focused on ending preventing and stopping the impending annexations. So we believe that we're at a critical juncture in the Palestinian struggle. On the one hand, we have an increasingly oppressive Israeli state, bolstered very powerfully by the American government, as evidenced by the so-called deal of the century, and of course the imminent debate on annexation scheduled for the 1st of July in the Knesset. And on the other hand, we are seeing increasing levels of mobilization across the world around racism in the United States and elsewhere, including in South Africa, as well as some of the key challenges which have surfaced through the pandemic, which have really highlighted unacceptably high levels of inequality and poverty across the world. But sadly, the silence about racism perpetrated against Palestinian citizens continues. Now, 50 Palestinian civil society organizations are challenging the world to end this silence. They have stated that how nations respond to the impending annexations constitutes, and this is a key point, and I quote, a litmus test for the international community, and I unquote, to demonstrate solidarity, not through rhetoric, but through concrete action. The International Palestinian BDS movement has called on the South African BDS coalition to take the lead in a global campaign to halt the annexations and other egregious violations of international law and human rights. So in crafting our response as a solidarity movement, we were very mindful of the need to respond to the demands that had been put forward by organizations and civil society in Palestine themselves. Hence, the global statement that we compiled and released for endorsement in South Africa is grounded in the call which was drafted by the civil society organizations of Parliament. And in essence, the global statement, the Global South statement, is calling on government in the Global South, and in our case, our own government, obviously, to use its power as the chair of the African Union, as well as its seat on the Security Council, to implement, as Comrade Omar said, some concrete and strategic measures in order to demonstrate their support for the Palestinian struggle.
All right, that's a member from BDS South Africa as we come out of that dialogue arranged by the African National Congress that's aimed at expressing support and solidarity with the people of Palestine. And we've had a number of speakers there. We've seen Lindy Wezulu, who's the ANC International Affairs Subcommittee chairperson, saying that the ANC will continue to express solidarity with the oppressed, and that the ANC will continue with its unwavering support for the Palestinians. Frans Baleni, who's the SACP's SG for International Relations, as well, reiterating the same call that Palestine needs to be freed, and basically saying that the Communist Party will continue to support the people of Palestine. We'll certainly have more for you regarding that dialogue that's been put up, or rather arranged by the African National Congress in solidarity with the people of Palestine. For now, let's take a quick